The rushing waters of the Colorado River thundered through the canyon with merciless force as Zara Landon struggled against its grip, her lungs burning for air in the spring of 1877. Her journey west had been full of promise, but now death seemed the only certainty as the current pulled her deeper into its cold embrace. Riley Lawrence saw the flash of blue fabric from atop his Mustang, not hesitating for a moment before dismounting and racing toward the riverbank. 5 years on the frontier had hardened him to danger, but something about the woman's desperate fight against the raging waters struck a chord deep within him. "Hold on," he shouted, though his words were lost to the roar of the river. Riley shed his gun belt, kicked off his boots, and plunged into the icy waters, fighting against the current with powerful strokes. The cold hit him like a physical blow, but he pushed forward, eyes locked on the increasingly still form being swept downstream. Zara felt her strength ebbing away, her sodden skirts dragging her down like anchors. Through water-blurred vision, she saw a figure swimming toward her, but consciousness was slipping away. Her last coherent thought was of her brother waiting for her in Durango, wondering if he would ever know what became of his only sister. Riley reached her just as her head slipped beneath the surface. His strong hand caught her arm, pulling her up. He secured his arm around her chest and began the brutal fight back to shore, every stroke a battle against the river's determination to claim them both. "Come on," he muttered through gritted teeth, muscles screaming as the current tried to drag them further downstream. A submerged boulder caught his shin, tearing flesh, but he barely registered the pain. The woman in his arms was limp, lifeless, and that terrified him more than any danger to himself. Finally, his boots found purchase on the riverbed. Staggering, half-dragging her unconscious form, Riley pulled them both onto the muddy bank and collapsed beside her. She wasn't breathing. "No, madam, not today," he gasped, turning her onto her side and pounding her back with desperate force. "You ain't dying on my watch." Water erupted from Zara's mouth as she convulsed, coughing violently. Riley helped her sit up, supporting her trembling form as she dragged precious air into her lungs. "Easy now," he soothed, his voice gentle despite his own shivering. "You're safe." When her eyes finally opened, they were the color of whiskey in sunlight. Riley felt an unexpected jolt in his chest that had nothing to do with his recent exertion. "You," she managed between coughs. "You saved me." Riley shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Anyone would have done the same, madam." "Zara," she corrected, her voice hoarse. "Zara Landon." "Riley Lawrence," he replied, noticing how she was shaking. "We need to get you warm, Miss Landon. My camp's not far." Standing on wobbly legs, Zara took in her surroundings. The river had carried them far from where she'd fallen in, and the sun was already beginning its descent toward the western horizon. Her wagon, her belongings, her traveling companions all were lost to her now. "My things," she said, distress clear in her voice. "First things first," Riley said firmly, whistling for his horse. The faithful Mustang appeared from upriver, picking its way carefully along the bank. "Warmth, food, then we'll figure out the rest." Too exhausted to argue, Zara nodded. Riley helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her, supporting her with one arm as he guided the Mustang toward his camp. The small clearing where Riley had set up camp was nestled among a stand of cottonwoods. A small fire pit, a modest tent, and supplies for his journey were all arranged with practical efficiency. Helping Zara down, Riley immediately set about building a fire, aware of her continued shivering. "How'd you end up in the river?" he asked as he struck flint to steel, sparks catching in the dry tinder. Zara wrapped her arms around herself, watching the growing flames. "Our wagon was crossing at the ford 5 miles back. The spring melt made the water higher than expected. The current caught us. The wagon overturned." Her voice cracked. "The Petersons, the family I was traveling with, I don't know what happened to them." Riley handed her a blanket from his bedroll. "The ford's a treacherous spot this time of year." "Where were you headed?" "Durango. My brother runs a general store there." Zara accepted the blanket gratefully, wrapping it around her sodden clothes. "I was joining him after our parents passed last winter." Riley nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I know Durango well. We can head there once you're recovered." He hesitated. "I'm sorry about your companions." "Thank you." Zara said softly, then looked up at him with sudden clarity. You risked your life for a stranger. I don't know how to repay such a debt. No debt, Riley said firmly, rummaging through his saddlebags. He pulled out a spare shirt and pants. These'll be too big, but they're dry. There's a stand of thick brush over there for privacy. I'll turn away while you change. Zara took the offered clothes, touched by his consideration. As she changed behind the bushes, she realized how close she had come to death and how this stranger had pulled her back from the brink without hesitation. When she returned to the fire, Riley had coffee brewing and was preparing a simple meal of beans and jerky. He glanced up, a smile ghosting across his lips at the sight of her swimming in his clothes, the sleeves rolled up multiple times. Not the latest Denver fashion, but it'll do, he remarked. Zara found herself smiling back. I'm grateful. She settled near the fire, the warmth bringing feeling back to her extremities. What brings you to these parts, Mr. Lawrence? Riley, he corrected, stirring the beans. Been working as a cattle driver for the past few years. Just finished a drive to Pueblo and was heading south. He poured her a cup of coffee, passing it carefully. Thought I might try my hand at something new. Maybe silver mining. Zara accepted the cup, letting the warmth seep into her palms. Dangerous work. So is driving cattle, Riley replied with a shrug. Life out here is full of risks. I'm learning that, Zara said quietly. As night fell, they talked by the fire. Riley told stories of cattle drives in frontier towns, while Zara spoke of her life back east in Missouri, her parents' farm, and her hopes for a new beginning in Durango. There was an ease between them that belied their short acquaintance. You should rest, Riley finally said, noting her exhaustion. Take the tent. I'll sleep by the fire. I couldn't. You nearly drowned today, he interrupted gently. Please, Miss Landon. Zara. She reminded him, then nodded in acquiescence. Thank you. Inside the small canvas tent, Zara listened to the night sounds of the wilderness and the occasional movement of Riley tending the fire. Despite the trauma of the day, she felt strangely safe in the presence of this quiet cowboy who had pulled her from the river. Sleep came swiftly. Morning brought clarity and soreness. Every muscle in Zara's body protested as she emerged from the tent to find Riley already awake, coffee brewing over a fresh fire. How are you feeling? He asked, concern evident in his blue eyes. Like I wrestled a grizzly, she admitted, accepting a cup of coffee. Riley smiled, the expression transforming his weather-worn face. River water can hit harder than any bear. We'll take it slow today. I need to get to Durango, Zara said. My brother will be worried sick. It's a 2-day ride from here, Riley explained. 3, given your condition. We'll need supplies from the trading post at Cedar Creek. It's about 4 hours ride from here. Zara nodded, then realized the implication. You're escorting me. Riley met her gaze steadily. I'm not about to leave a lady alone in the wilderness with nothing but oversized clothes and no supplies. Unless you object to my company? No, Zara said quickly, perhaps too quickly. I'm grateful for your help. They broke camp efficiently, Zara doing what she could despite her stiffness. Riley helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her, and they set off toward Cedar Creek. The day was clear, the spring landscape vibrant with new growth, a stark contrast to yesterday's near tragedy. Riding double meant proximity, and Zara was acutely aware of Riley's solid presence behind her, his arm occasionally steadying her when the terrain grew rough. It was strangely comforting, this physical reminder that she wasn't alone. Been in the West long? Riley asked, breaking a comfortable silence. 3 weeks, Zara replied. Everything is so vast out here. Beautiful, but unforgiving. That it is, Riley agreed. Took me a year to stop feeling like an outsider. Born in Pennsylvania myself. What brought you west? Riley was quiet for a moment. War changes a man. After Gettysburg, home didn't feel like home anymore. Zara understood without further explanation. Many men had gone west after the war, seeking new beginnings far from battlefields soaked in the blood of brothers. My father never spoke of his time in the war, she said softly. But I would catch him sometimes, staring at nothing, somewhere far away. Riley's arm tightened briefly around her waist, an acknowledgement of shared understanding. They rode on, the rhythm of the horse's gait lulling them into contemplative silence. Cedar Creek proved to be little more than a trading post, a livery stable, and a single saloon serving the surrounding area. As they approached, Zara became uncomfortably aware of her appearance, a woman in men's clothing, riding double with a cowboy. "People will talk," she murmured. Riley dismounted and helped her down. "Let them. Truth is stranger than anything they might imagine." The trading post owner, a barrel-chested man named Hank, raised eyebrows at their appearance but asked no questions as they purchased supplies: a horse for Zara, appropriate clothing, food, and necessities for the journey to Durango. Riley paid without hesitation, waving away Zara's protests. "You can settle accounts with your brother when we reach Durango," he said firmly. While Zara changed into her new clothes in a back room the shopkeeper's wife kindly offered, Riley arranged for a room at the small boarding house attached to the saloon. By the time Zara emerged, feeling more herself in a simple blue dress, practical boots, and a warm shawl, plans were set. "We'll rest here tonight," Riley explained as they walked toward the boarding house. "Fresh start in the morning." Zara nodded, grateful for his foresight. Though she was eager to reach her brother, her body still ached from her ordeal. The boarding house was simple but clean, with 2 small rooms available. After a modest meal in the adjoining saloon during which Zara endured curious glances from the few patrons, they retired early. "I'll knock at sunrise," Riley said as they stood in the narrow hallway between their rooms. In the dim lamplight, his features seemed softer, less weathered. "Riley," Zara said, suddenly needing to express what had been building in her heart since she'd opened her eyes on that riverbank. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there yesterday. But I was," he said simply. "Yes," she agreed, a small smile forming. "You were." Something passed between them then, a current as tangible as the river that had brought them together. Riley cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "Rest well, Miss Landon." "Zara," she corrected gently. A smile tugged at his mouth. "Zara." The journey to Durango took 3 days, as Riley had predicted. They traveled at a steady pace, mindful of Zara's recovery and the limitations of their horses. Each night, they made camp beneath the stars, sharing stories and slowly revealing pieces of themselves to each other. Riley spoke of his 5 years on the frontier, the cattle drives, the small skirmishes with rustlers, the lonely beauty of the open range. Zara told him of her dreams for a new life in the West, helping her brother's business grow, perhaps eventually teaching in the town's small school. "You have a gift for telling stories," Riley remarked on their second night, as Zara finished recounting a childhood adventure. "Those kids would be lucky to have you as their teacher." Zara felt a warmth in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the campfire. "And you have a gift for listening. Easy to listen to something worth hearing," he replied simply. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, they crested a hill to see Durango spread before them in the valley below. The small but growing town bustled with activity, smoke rising from chimneys, wagons moving along the main street. "There it is," Riley said, a hint of something like regret in his voice. Zara felt a sudden tightness in her chest. Their journey was ending. This man who had saved her life, who had shown such kindness and consideration, would soon ride away. The thought brought an unexpected ache. "My brother's store is on the main street," she said, her voice not quite steady. "The one with the blue sign, according to his letters." They rode into town side by side, drawing curious glances. Durango in 1877 was still a frontier settlement, though growing rapidly with the promise of the railroad coming through. New faces were common, but a woman arriving with a lone cowboy still attracted attention. Landon General Goods was easy to spot with its freshly painted blue sign. As they dismounted outside, the door opened and a tall man with the same honey-colored eyes as Zara appeared. "Zachary," Zara called, emotion overwhelming her as she rushed forward. "Zara? My God!" Her brother engulfed her in a fierce embrace. "I've been out of my mind with worry. The Petersons arrived yesterday, said you were lost in the river crossing. The Petersons are alive." Zara pulled back, joy and relief flooding her face. "Shaken up, lost everything, but alive," Zachary confirmed. "They were certain you had drowned." "I nearly did," Zara said, turning to Riley, who stood a respectful distance away. "If not for Mr. Lawrence." Zachary's attention shifted to the quiet cowboy. "You saved my sister?" Riley shrugged uncomfortably. "Just happened to be in the right place." Zachary stepped forward, extending his hand. Then I owe you a debt I can never repay, sir. Riley shook his hand firmly. No debt. Anyone would have done the same. Not anyone would have succeeded, Zara said softly. Not anyone would have cared for me afterward, brought me safely here. Zachary looked between them, understanding dawning in his eyes. You must stay with us, Mr. Lawrence. I insist. Our home is behind the store, modest, but comfortable. Riley hesitated, glancing at Zara. I wouldn't want to impose. Please, she said, the word carrying more weight than its single syllable suggested. Something in her expression made Riley nod. Much obliged. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Riley helped Zachary with the heavy work around the store, chopping wood, unloading deliveries, repairing a leaking roof. Zara settled into her new home, visiting the Petersons to share in mutual relief at their survival, and beginning to make acquaintances in town. Each evening, they shared meals together, Zachary's bachelor quarters transformed by Zara's touch. Riley found himself lingering, postponing his vague plans to continue south. When Zachary mentioned needing help with a supply run to the nearby mining camps, Riley volunteered without hesitation. You planning to put down roots in Durango? Zachary asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset while Zara finished preparing supper inside. Riley considered the question, rolling a cigarette between his fingers. Hadn't planned on it. But, Zachary prompted. Riley's eyes drifted to the open window where Zara's humming drifted out into the evening air. But plans change. Zachary nodded, understanding. For what it's worth, you'd be welcome. Town needs good men. Store needs help. He paused meaningfully. My sister needs someone who sees her for who she is. Before Riley could respond, Zara called them in for supper. The conversation turned to other things, but Riley felt the weight of possibility settling around him like a familiar saddle. A week after their arrival, word came that a flash flood had washed out the main trail north of town. Zara immediately thought of the Wilsons, an elderly couple who lived in an isolated cabin along that route. They came to town only once a month for supplies, and she had met them on her second day in Durango. They might be stranded, she worried aloud at breakfast. Or worse, if their cabin was in the flood's path. I'll ride out to check on them, Riley said without hesitation. I'm coming with you, Zara declared, meeting his surprised look with determination. Mrs. Wilson is ailing. If they need help, an extra pair of hands would be useful. Riley knew better than to argue with the stubborn set of her jaw. They set out an hour later, Zara now confident on her own horse, supplies for the Wilsons packed in their saddlebags. The ride took them through beautiful country, forest giving way to open meadows bursting with spring wildflowers. The aftermath of the flood was evident as they neared the Wilsons' property. Uprooted trees, debris scattered across the landscape, the trail itself washed away in places. The cabin's just beyond that rise, Zara said, pointing ahead. As they crested the hill, relief washed through them at the sight of the small cabin standing intact on higher ground above the flood's reach. Smoke curled from the chimney, a sure sign of life within. Old Man Wilson emerged at the sound of approaching horses, rifle cautiously in hand, until he recognized Zara. Miss Landon. Didn't expect to see anyone after that wall of water came through yesterday. We came to check on you and Mrs. Wilson, Zara explained as they dismounted. Brought some supplies, in case you needed them. Gratitude shone in the old man's weathered face. Mighty kind. Martha's been fretting about her medicines. Trail to town's gone, and I wasn't sure how we'd manage. Riley helped unload the supplies while Zara went inside to check on Mrs. Wilson. The elderly woman was indeed low on her heart medicine, which Zachary had fortunately included in their supplies. As they prepared to leave, promising to return in a week with more provisions, Mrs. Wilson took Zara's hand. That young man, she said, nodding toward where Riley was speaking with her husband outside. He looks at you the way my Thomas looked at me 60 years ago. Zara felt her cheeks warm. We hardly know each other. The old woman's eyes twinkled. Some things don't need time, just the right circumstance to reveal what's already there. The ride back to Durango was quieter, both Zara and Riley lost in their own thoughts. The sun was setting as they reached the valley, painting the landscape in gold and amber hues. Riley drew his horse to a halt on a ridge overlooking the town. Zara stopped beside him, questioning. Something wrong? Riley shook his head, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. Been thinking about what comes next. Zara's heart quickened. And what does come next? I've been moving for 5 years, Riley said slowly. Never staying anywhere long enough to belong. He turned to face her fully. Until now. Zara held his gaze, hardly daring to breathe. Are you saying you want to stay in Durango? I'm saying I want to stay wherever you are, Riley said, the words simple but profound. If you'll have me. The world seemed to still around them, the only sound the soft nickering of their horses and the distant cry of a hawk. I nearly died in that river, Zara said softly. When you pulled me out, you gave me back my life. But these past days, riding beside you, talking by the fire, seeing how you help others without hesitation, you've given me so much more. Riley moved his horse closer, reaching across to take her hand. I wasn't living, not really, before I saw you in that river. Just existing, moving from place to place, job to job. And now, Zara asked, hope rising in her chest. Now I know where I'm meant to be, Riley said, his voice certain. If you feel the same. Zara's answer was to lean across the space between their horses, her lips finding his in a kiss that spoke more eloquently than words. When they parted, both were smiling. Is that a yes? Riley asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. That's a yes, Zara confirmed. They rode back into town hand in hand, the future opening before them like the vast western sky. 3 months later, on a perfect summer day, Riley and Zara were married in Durango's small church. Zachary gave his sister away with obvious joy, the Petersons and Wilsons among the guests who celebrated with them. Riley had become Zachary's partner in the store, his knowledge of cattle and frontier needs expanding their business to serve the ranchers in the surrounding area. Zara had indeed begun teaching at the town school 3 days a week, her natural gift for storytelling making her a favorite among the children. Their wedding night was spent in the small house Riley had built with his own hands on a plot of land just outside town, close enough for convenience, far enough for privacy. As they stood on the porch watching the stars appear one by one, Riley wrapped his arms around his wife from behind. Happy? He asked, his breath warm against her ear. Zara leaned back into his embrace, secure in the knowledge that this man who had fought a river to save her would stand beside her through whatever life brought their way. More than I ever thought possible, she answered truthfully. Who would have thought nearly drowning would lead me to the best life I could imagine? Riley turned her in his arms, his eyes reflecting the starlight. I thank God every day for leading me to that riverbank at just the right moment. Divine providence, Zara agreed, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. Or perhaps just the current carrying you to where you needed to be, Riley suggested with a smile. Either way, Zara said softly, I'm exactly where I belong. Their kiss sealed a promise that had begun in the turbulent waters of the Colorado River, a love strong enough to fight against any current, steadfast enough to build a life upon, deep enough to last a lifetime. Years later, when their children asked how they met, Riley and Zara would exchange a look filled with memory and meaning before telling the tale of a desperate river rescue that had led to a love neither had been searching for, but both had been waiting to find. And in the telling, the rushing waters of that day would seem less frightening and more like the hand of destiny, guiding two souls to the precise moment when saving a life became the beginning of sharing a life together.